In 1992, interstate highways are at their all-time high. The opening of the I70 through Glenwood Canyons marked the completion of a project spanning the entire country, and the ability to travel long distances in a short amount of time was invaluable to many people. Unfortunately, more than one of those people used the highways for far more nefarious needs, and in the spring of 1992, a serial killer would use Interstate 70 to commit one of the most bizarre and infamous killing sprees known to man. Nicknamed the I70 Killer, he proudly entered Interstate 70, selecting retail stores close to the highway, and surveyed the interior, pretending to be a customer to check if his desired target, a lone female shop clerk, was truly alone. He then struck, and demanding complete control of his victims, he would force them into a room out of view, then executing them with a .22 caliber pistol. They also suspect him of being the killer known as the I-35 Killer, who operated in Texas from 1993 to 1994. They also suspect him of another brutal murder in 2001. Due to the nature of the organized, methodical attacks and murders, detectives were less stumped, and with only a few good leads. Eventually, though, the leads ran cold. And because of that, to this day, the identity of the I-70 Killer is unknown. However, recently, detectives have reopened the case in a desperate attempt to bring this murderer behind bars. Without further ado, let's jump into the case of the I-70 Killer.
Police are sticking with the theory the motive for the killing is robbery.
On the 8th of April 1992, Robin Fuldawer was a 26-year-old full-time worker of the Payless Shoe Source located in 7325 Pendleton Pike, Indianapolis, just off Interstate 70. As she was one of the only two full-time employees, she was used to covering lone shifts. On that fateful day, her co-worker called in sick, and Fuldawer knew she had to manage the shop alone as a clerk. In her wildest dreams, she would have never known what would happen to her. In the afternoon, the manager of the Payless Shoe Source called Lucretia Gullett to check on the store after Fuldawer was unresponsive to her phone calls. Larissa then quote,
"Quite a while, and no one's answering the phone. I had walked to the door, and I opened it up, and I noticed immediately to the left the cash register was open. So I called the police immediately. When I didn't see anybody, didn't see the woman that works there, I immediately called the police."
After police were called, Lucretia explored the shop, and eventually she encountered a door to her left. It was closed. Lucretia later stated,
"I didn't go in there, didn't want to go in there. I just went back to the front."
A later newspaper article revealed that she walked back because she was fearful of what she might have saw. She had every reason to be, for behind the closed door was the body of Robin Fuldawer, lured, according to police, to the back room, where she was shot, execution style, to the back of the head with a .22 caliber. After the murder was committed, the murderer jumped at the counter, stole less than $100, and escaped through the rear exit. With Fuldawer's absence, people stole shoes from the shelves, and though less than $100 was stolen and clearly organized method of the murder, simply because of the missing shoes, the police deducted that robbery was the main motive, and that it had gone wrong. 3 days later, though, that perspective would change forever.
The victims have been identified as 32-year-old store owner Patricia Majors and her 23-year-old assistant Patricia Smith.
On April the 11th, 3 days after the killing of Robin Fuldawer, two employees of the La Bride de Elegance, located in 4613 East Kellogg, Wichita, Patricia Smith and Patricia Majors, aged 23 and 32 respectively, were waiting for the late arrival of a male customer to collect a cummerbund. Patricia Majors, who was the manager of the store, was described as her husband as,
"There wasn't a person that came in the store that didn't love her to death."
At around 6:20 in the evening, the customer who purchased a cummerbund came to pick up his order. Instead, a man with sleepy eyes stepped out and directed the customer into the back of the store. However, instead of complying, the customer ran, with the man fleeing not shortly behind, albeit in another direction. The customer, now an unnamed witness, called the police a full hour after his encounter due to fear. The police arrived, and according to them, it was about 6:10 in the evening, the suspect approached the shop. Smith and Majors probably thought this was a customer who had arrived for his cummerbund and let him in. However, after gaining entry to the shop, it is suspected he forced the women out of sight into a back room, and then he executed them, both with shots to the head with the .22 caliber and quickly jumping the counter, stealing less than 100 before encountering the customer. The unnamed witness agreed to a police sketch of the man he encountered. Apart from the sleepy eyes, the witness described him as a white male of average height and roughly 150 pounds, slightly hollow cheeks, with light brown hair with a red tint and some stubble. The subsequent sketch would prove to be one of the most promising leads in the investigation. Meanwhile, connections with the Robin Fuldahl cases quickly being made aware. Apart from the same caliber of gun being used in each crime scene, all three women were murdered with the same MO, modus operandi, and robbery did not appear to be the main motive. Another thing to note was the amount of distance between the two murder scenes, numbering nearly 700 miles.
In Terre Haute, Indiana, this man, clerk at a ceramic store, becomes victim 4.
On April the 27th, Michael Mick McGowan, a 40-year-old man working for his mother's store called Sylvia Ceramics in 2615 Terre Haute, Indiana. He was described as his sister as
good man. Couldn't have been any better.
McGowan was inside the stop stocking shelves, and as he was doing so, a man walked up behind McGowan and shot him at extremely close range in the back of the head. After committing the crime, the man stole McGowan's wallet, some money from the counter, and fled the scene. Unlike the other victims, who were brunette women with long hair, McGowan was a 40-year-old man. Initial reports indicate at the time McGowan has a long ponytail, and with McGowan's reported slight build at the time, the police chalked it down to a case of mistaken gender by the I70 killer. However, new reports are throwing that theory into question.
He did not have a ponytail. However, he was smaller. He was tall, but he was of smaller build.
These differences leave us with two possibilities, which ironically are polar opposites. The first is that the killer was more opportunistic than previously thought.
And being a pottery store named Sylvia's, he may have assumed a female was going to be inside. And when he realized it was a male, I think he probably was concerned about a struggle ensuing if he didn't shoot him there.
The second option was that the killer was more organized than imagined. Even though McGowan was working that day, the main operator of the shop was McGowan's mother. This would imply that the killer stalked the shop early, and after seeing McGowan's mother alone, he assumed that he would meet and kill her on April the 27th. But after entering the store and seeing a man, he realized that he couldn't force McGowan into a back room without a fight, and therefore executed in plain view of any customer. Police would also question the time of the murders. Most of the murders, with Patricia Smith and Majors being an exception up to now, occurred within broad daylight, leaving investigators to assume that he possessed a quirk for risk-taking.
Every serial killer has a certain quirk, and I think his quirk is that he got off on the fact that people were basically right there, and he was doing something that heinous.
At approximately 2:30 that afternoon, she was discovered shot to death in the back of the store.
On May the 3rd, a 24-year-old named Nancy Kitzmiller was preparing for a new job at the Defense Mapping Agency located in St. Louis. Meanwhile, she worked at a store called Boot Village, which was located in the Bogey Hills Plaza in 2079 St. Charles, Missouri. Her father described Kitzmiller as
Nancy was, like perhaps many of the people you know, a shy little girl who was coming out and becoming successful as a young woman.
On that day, she volunteered to go work so another employee could take the day off. At around 2:20 p.m., shoppers reported seeing Nancy conversing with a man. He was described as having red hair and medium height. A few minutes later, a completely different set of shoppers found Nancy dead.
Kitzmiller was working at the Boot Village just off Interstate 70 at Zumbell Road. At approximately 2:30 that afternoon, she was discovered shot to death in the back of the store.
Miraculously, on a busy Sunday, no one reported seeing the killer leave the scene or take less than 200 from the counter. The killer had taken more risks than ever before by hunting in a crowded plaza, but somehow he still managed to get away.
The clerk at this novelty store in Raytown, Missouri was killed too like all the others, shot execution style in the back of the store.
On May 7th, 37-year-old Sarah Blessing opened the store of many colors located at Raytown, Missouri. The shop sold health goods and had been opened by Sarah and her friends, and they were each used to covering shifts by themselves. At around 6:15 p.m., the store owner of the sports shop next to the store Many Colors, Tim Hickman, reported seeing a man in a parking lot wearing a grey sports coat, which would have been too warm for the weather.
I happened to glance up, and I see a gentleman coming across the parking lot. He was right about 50 yards out, 75 yards out, and it was a really nice day like today, and he had on a sports coat.
Hickman later heard a pop through the wall separating the two shops. He later said,
And so I'm working on the TV, and all of a sudden, about maybe 2 or 3 minutes later, I hear a pop. I grabbed my .38, and I had it behind my back. And I jumped through the cutout, and I went to the front door, and I opened the door. And as soon as I looked out, the guy I saw in the parking lot, he was whipping around the corner of the building.
Hickman then attempted to follow the man, but eventually losing sight of him. Then he rushed inside Sarah's store, only to find her body.
Went next door and called for Sarah, and then I saw her feet sticking out.
Tim Hickman then called the police. The police then arrived and found the same brutal pattern. Sarah was forced into the back room and shot in the back of the head with a .22 caliber. Investigators noted the distance from the Interstate 70, which was 3 miles further from the interstate than any of the previous murder scenes.
Just a familiarity of the area, it makes you wonder if, what brought them over a little bit farther out, comfort, do they know somebody? I mean, you really can't pinpoint any really reasoning behind it right now.
Those are the confirmed victims of the I70 killer, who in 29 days traveled more than 1,200 miles, executing a total of 6 shop clerks with a shot at the back of the head. The spree of murders continues to be one of the most strange ever recorded, with speculation about this case continuing to this day. However, just a year later, in 1993, another string of attacks happened near Interstate 35, with the killings bearing striking resemblance to the atrocities of the I70 killer.
Amy died Tuesday night from gunshot wounds to the neck, head, and face. She was at work at the Dancer's Closet in Arlington when someone robbed the store. In her condition, Amy called 911 for help.
Okay, do you need an ambulance? Okay, where are you hurt?
I never heard him come up on me, never heard a thing, heard a very loud pop behind me, and then was looking at the side of an armoire, and I realized I was falling very slowly.
Vicky Webb was the only surviving victim. At the age of 35, she worked at the Alternatives gift shop, located at the Rice Village Shopping District in Houston, Texas. On the 15th of January 1994, at 4 p.m., her shop closing time, she noticed seeing a man walking around, surveying the interior of the shop. Vicky Webb described the man as
The 2 windows, there was 2 side windows. The front was windowed. He was very much looking out those. Never really got close, to me before he shot me. He was acting very nervous, but I was overriding that.
The man then told her he wanted to purchase a copper picture frame.
He had said something about a frame that he wanted. He pointed at the frame. I had it in my hand, was walking back. I never heard him come up on me, never heard a thing, heard a very loud pop behind me, and then was looking at the side of an armoire, and I realized I was falling very slowly down the side of the armoire.
After he shot her, Vicky described the man's following actions.
But he came up over me, and he put the gun back to my forehead, he went click, and he chuckled. So he's a very sick man.
The reason that the gun clicked instead of firing is due to a misfire on the part of the gun. Before he could clear the jam, however, a nearby noise startled him, causing him to leap over the counter, stealing a small amount of cash, and dashing out the front door, leaving Vicky for dead. Luckily, Vicky survived, and due to her abnormally large spine, recovered basic cognitive functions in a matter of weeks following the attack.
Notice that the robber didn't try to hide his face.
On the 30th of April 2001, mere kilometers from the murder of Michael McCown, a man named Billy Brossman was working at 7th and 70 liquor store in 2701 Terre Haute, Indiana. At 6:30 p.m., surveillance footage recorded a man with average height and thinning red hair entering the store. The man calmly walked to the counter and put a gun to store clerk Billy Brossman, demanding the cash, at which Brossman complied. The man then brought Brossman to the back aisle and shot Brossman in the back of the head, and then proceeding to run out the front door. The strange thing was, the man didn't even attempt to cover his face, and he appeared to not be wearing gloves even as he touched some beer, the cash register, and the front door during the commission of the murder. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted, but as it stands, the killer of Billy Brossman is still uncaught.
I'm optimistic that the killer's name is in one of these books.
Following the killing spree of the I-70 and I-35 killers and the killer Billy Brossman, investigators in both cases began to compare notes. They ended up agreeing that the I-70 and I-35 killers are one and the same, and after gathering various departments together, they began to make a profile of the killer. The police sketches indicate a man of average height and build. The man has dull red hair, slightly hollowed cheeks, and some stubble. The age range is from 35 to 50 years old. Due to the method of murder and the specific locations, it is very likely that he was an organized serial killer, stalking the selected shops before striking. A thing to note is because of the long distance of the spree, 1,200 miles, the killer most likely is unemployed or had a job related to traveling. He was a spree killer because of the short amount of times between each murder before taking a long break. He possibly also took souvenirs in form of small amount of cash. The time of the murder was noted, as it was usually in daytime, in the early hours of the afternoon. The ballistic evidence was one of the most strong leads in the case, and so the .22 caliber bullets left at the scenes were intensely examined. The following investigations into the bullets indicated that the gun was an Irma Werke ET-22, an unusual gun manufactured from 1967 to 1969 specifically for the West German Art Navy. It also could be an Intratec Scorpion, though this was less likely than the Irma Werke ET-22. The examination of the bullets also noted that he brought in a high-capacity magazine, which indicated that he was prepared to fire his gun more than one time, indicating he was very prepared. Rouge and corundum traces were also found in each of the crime scene bullets, which makes it clear that whoever used the gun had also used the corundum and rouge in a process called fire lapping, which was coating bullets with corundum and rouge to shoot through the barrel, to clean the inside of the barrel, or to fix ejection problems. The second option is that he could be using them in machinery work. The I-70 killer is an example of a person who does not care. Simply because of his own twisted passion, countless lives were ruined. The lives of the victims, the lives of the investigators, and the life of the families, who, until this killer gets caught, can never truly begin to grieve. Meanwhile, the killer carries on life, not caring about the lives he stopped. He lives two different lives, the one that he lives on a daily basis, and the other, more sinister life. The other life whose sleepy eye stares down at everyone who attempts to hunt him down. This is the aged composite of the I-70 killer based on eyewitness descriptions. If you know anyone that looks familiar, or has any traits that the St. Charles Police Department has handed out, please call these numbers. I'm Mr. Conrad, and I'll be seeing you at a later video.